I sat at the long mahogany table, my fingers lightly tapping against the polished surface as I watched my wife, Camille, smirk while handing me the coffee pot. The way she did it, so casual, so dismissive, as if I were nothing more than a servant in my own marriage, made my stomach twist. "Just pour the coffee, dear, and sit at the back," she said, her tone laced with condescension. A soft chuckle rippled through the room, blending seamlessly with the clinking of crystal glasses and the rustle of fine linen napkins. Camille's family, a self-important pack of corporate elites, barely acknowledged my presence. They were too wrapped up in their own world, too certain of their own superiority. At the head of the table sat Gerald, Camille's father, his silver hair combed back with meticulous precision, his dark suit tailored to perfection. A man who spoke in boardroom, strategies and acquisition numbers, whose approval I had never truly earned. Beside him, Lorraine, Camille's mother, dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin, her diamond bracelet catching the warm glow of the chandelier. She had always looked at me with thinly veiled disdain, as if Camille had married beneath her station. Then there was Lucas, Camille's older brother, the golden child, the heir to their empire. He barely spared me a glance, too busy scrolling through his phone, checking stock prices or emails, whatever held more importance than the man married to his sister. 5 years of this. 5 years of carefully measured words, of swallowing. My pride in the name of harmony. I had played my role well, the accommodating husband, the one who stayed in the background while his wife's family ran the show. But tonight, everything was about to change. I glanced at my watch, a subtle smirk curling at the corner of my lips. They had no idea their world was about to shift in ways they never imagined. The conversation carried on without me. Something about a major acquisition, a crucial business deal they were on the verge of closing. Their voices buzzed around me, filled with strategies and self-assured confidence. I listened, not out of interest, but because I enjoyed the irony of it all. Then the doors to the dining hall swung open. A sharply dressed man strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Richard Connor, the CEO of the very company they were desperate to strike a deal with, walked in with the air of a man who knew his importance. The moment his eyes landed on me, however, he froze. The shift was subtle at first, a flicker of recognition passing through his features. But then it solidified into something sharper. Shock, maybe even disbelief. His hesitation did not go unnoticed. Camille's family watched him closely, their poised expressions barely masking their curiosity. "Aren't you the owner of—" Richard began, his voice trailing off as the realization dawned on him fully. A sharp, unnatural silence fell over the room. Lorraine's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. It was almost poetic. All eyes turned to me. I set the coffee pot down gently, the sound of porcelain meeting wood the only thing breaking the suffocating silence. Camille's smirk had vanished, replaced by something far less certain. Gerald cleared his throat, his grip tightening around his fork. "There must be some mistake," he said carefully, his voice strained. "This is just my son-in-law. He doesn't own anything." But Richard wasn't looking at Gerald anymore. He was looking at me, and suddenly I had their full attention. I leaned back in my chair, slow, measured, savoring the moment. They had always dismissed me, overlooked me, treated me like an afterthought. But now, for the first time, they were beginning to understand. The ground beneath their feet was shifting, and they were about to learn exactly who they had underestimated. The silence was thick, suffocating, like the eye of a storm that had yet to unleash its full force. I could feel the weight of every gaze at that long mahogany table, each pair of eyes darting between me and Richard Connor. Camille was the first to crack. Her smirk had disappeared, her fingers curling into fists against the crisp white linen of the tablecloth. Her face had paled, her lips parting as she searched for something, anything to say. Gerald, ever the businessman, forced a tight chuckle, straightening his posture as he turned to Richard. "You must be mistaken," he said, his voice attempting its usual command, though there was a faint waver to it. "This is just my son-in-law. He doesn't own anything." Richard didn't look convinced. His sharp gaze flicked back to me, his brow furrowed. "You didn't tell them, did you?" I exhaled slowly, letting a smirk of my own take form as I leaned forward, finally engaging. "Tell them what?" I asked, my voice carrying just enough amusement to send a ripple of unease through the room. Camille sat up straighter, her chair scraping against the floor as she turned to me, her eyes dark with suspicion. "What is he talking about?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted to enjoy this. Richard smirked then, shaking his head slightly, as if marveling at the absurdity of the situation. He turned toward Camille's family, his expression unreadable but his voice firm. "That your husband," he said, nodding toward me, "owns Wolf Industries, the very company that's been silently acquiring shares in your family's business for the last 6 months." The air was sucked out of the room. Lorraine's breath hitched, audibly, her hand instinctively clutching her pearl necklace as if it could anchor her in place. Gerald's face contorted, his fingers tightening around the arms of his chair, his knuckles turning white. Lucas, who had been lazily scrolling through his phone just minutes ago, suddenly went rigid. His phone dropped onto the table with a dull thud. Camille's reaction, however, was the most satisfying. She stared at me, blinking as if trying to process the words she had just heard. Her lips trembled slightly before she could regain control. "That's not possible," she whispered, shaking her head more to herself than anyone else. "That's not possible." But it was, and they all knew it. I took my time before responding, savoring their unraveling. Then, finally, I leaned back in my chair, stretching out my legs as I picked up my coffee cup, taking a slow sip before placing it back down. "Technically," I said, my voice casual, "not yet. But as of today, Wolf Industries owns 48% of your stock." Gerald inhaled sharply. Lucas's jaw clenched. "I came here to finalize the deal for the remaining 52%. The silence that followed was deafening. I met Camille's gaze, letting her see the truth in my eyes. "I bought the company instead," I said simply, "because no matter what I did, I was never going to be enough for your family." She flinched, but I didn't let the moment linger. Turning to Richard, I instructed, "Letun, get the papers signed. I'd hate to keep the employees waiting." Richard smirked knowingly and pulled out the final documents. Gerald's chair scraped loudly as he shot to his feet. "We're not done," he growled. "Yes, we are." I didn't even look at him. Richard handed me a pen, and with one stroke, the last 52% of the company became mine. Camille's breath hitched. Lucas looked ready to throw something. Lorraine pressed a trembling hand to her chest, while Gerald stood frozen, his mouth slightly open in shock. I buttoned my suit jacket. "Oh, and one more thing." I slid a paper across the table toward Gerald. His hands shook as he picked it up. "An offer. To stay on as a consultant at half his salary. No decision-making power, no privileges, just an employee." His face turned a shade of purple I didn't think was humanly possible. "You think I'd ever work for you?" I smirked. "No, but I figured I'd be polite and offer." Turning to Lucas, who glared at me with barely restrained fury, I said, "Clean out your office by the end of the week. No room for nepotism anymore." His jaw clenched, but he knew there was nothing he could do. Camille looked ill. "I'll see myself out," I said casually, slipping my hands into my pockets. Richard followed, nodding in approval. "That was brutal," he mused. "But damn, it was satisfying." I exhaled slowly. They had it coming. He chuckled. "What's next? Boss?" I glanced back at the stunned, broken family who had spent years underestimating me. I smiled. Now we rebuild. In my new office, I gazed over the city skyline. The transition had begun. The board, once stacked with Camille's family cronies, had been replaced with industry veterans. The employees, the true backbone, had been notified. My assistant, Monica, entered. "Sir, the press is outside. They want a statement." "Let them. Wait." She smirked. "Also, Gerald just called. He's demanding an emergency shareholder meeting." I chuckled. "Of course he is." Gerald stormed in moments later, his fury barely contained. "I'm not going to let you get away with this." I met his glare. "You don't have a choice. We